I recently bought an old Chinese car for just $450 per ton. It all started when a friend from Shanghai called me, telling me about a car he'd come across, a vintage Shanghai sedan from the 1980s. He said it was in terrible shape, but it was rare and incredibly cheap. When I saw the photos, I couldn't resist. The interior was surprisingly intact, though the front windshield was shattered. The exterior? A total mess. The doors were barely hanging on, and the car looked like it had been abandoned for decades. But the price was too good to pass up. I paid $625 for the car and spent another $250 to have it shipped safely to me. I have this bad habit of chasing bargains, always looking for the thrill of getting something valuable for next to nothing. This time, I got more trouble than I bargained for. When the car arrived, I finally inspected it closely and realized I'd made a huge mistake. The engine had been completely flooded. Rust covered every inch of it, from the fan to the bolts. It was a disaster. I cursed myself for being careless, but the car was already here. There was no turning back. I told myself, if it can turn, it can run. The fan, even though it was nearly rusted solid, still moved just a little. That small movement gave me hope. I pushed the car into the workshop and decided to take on the challenge. The first step was to remove the engine. Easier said than done. The bolts were so rusted they wouldn't budge, and I had to use a torch to heat them just to loosen them up. Piece by piece, I started disassembling the engine. Every step of the way, I found myself muttering, "Oh my God, what have I gotten myself into?" Finally, after hours of effort, I managed to remove it. The engine was in worse shape than I imagined. Water had completely infiltrated it, and rust had taken over every part. Cleaning the engine was a painstaking process. I found that the pistons were seized, the valves were clogged, and the cylinder walls were covered in rust and grime. I spent hours scraping, polishing, and cleaning each part. To my relief, the crankshaft was in decent condition. That small piece of good news saved me a few $100s in repairs. I carefully laid out each part in order, afraid I might forget where everything belonged when it came time to reassemble. It felt like such an amateurish way to do things, but it worked. Bit by bit, the engine started to come back to life. With the engine out of the way, I turned my attention to the bodywork. When I first saw the car, I thought the exterior looked rough but manageable. I was so wrong. The body was riddled with rust, holes, and dents. The doors were barely attached, and the roof looked like it could cave in at any moment. I realized I had taken on a much bigger project than I expected, but I was already committed. I spent weeks sandblasting every panel, welding patches where rust had eaten away the metal, and smoothing out the surface. It was exhausting and frustrating work, but as the clean panels started to take shape, I felt a growing sense of pride. Finally, it was time for paint. I chose a bright red, a bold color that I felt symbolized youth, energy, and life. I wanted my dad to feel vibrant every time he saw it. Watching the paint go on was one of the most satisfying moments of the entire restoration. The car transformed before my eyes, shedding its rusted shell and becoming something beautiful. It was no longer an old wreck. It was something alive. Throughout the restoration, my dad had been keeping an eye on my progress. He grew up in an era where this car was a symbol of success, and it brought back memories of his younger days. When he saw the finished car, his reaction was everything I had hoped for. His face lit up with pure joy. He told me how much it reminded him of the car his relatives used to own when he was young. Seeing his smile made every sleepless night and moment of frustration worth it. We decided to take the car for a spin together. Watching him behind the wheel, I saw him become like a kid again, excited and carefree. We drove through the countryside, talking about life and sharing stories. My dad reminisced about his youth, telling me stories I had never heard before. For him, this car wasn't just a vehicle, it was a time machine. For me, it was a bridge to connect us in ways we hadn't in years. When we got back, he insisted on taking some photos with the car. He stood proudly next to it, beaming with happiness. It had been so long since I'd seen him like that. Restoring this car wasn't just about bringing an old machine back to life. It was about creating something meaningful, something that brought us closer together. Over the following weeks, my dad couldn't stop talking about the car. He joined a local car club, showing off his restored Shanghai sedan to other enthusiasts. He made new friends, shared tips, and even started learning more about car restoration himself. Seeing him so happy and passionate filled me with pride. One of the most unforgettable moments came when my dad entered the car in a local vintage car show. He didn't expect to win anything, he just wanted to share his love for the car. To our surprise, it won the award for Best Restoration. Watching him accept the trophy, holding it high with pride, was a moment I'll never forget. He turned to me and said, "This isn't just my win, it's ours. I'll cherish those words forever." This car has become more than just a restoration project. It's a symbol of love, hard work, and the bond between a father and son. Every time my dad drives it, I hope he feels the same pride and joy that I felt while working on it. And every time I see it parked in front of our house, I'm reminded of everything we've shared, our stories, our laughter, and our connection. To my dad, this car is a piece of his history brought back to life. To me, it's a reminder that the best gifts aren't bought. They're built with love, patience, and dedication. I'll always treasure the memories we've created, and I hope we continue to make many more. Here's to the miles ahead, to the journeys we'll take together, and to the bond that will always keep us connected. Dad, this one's for you. I love you.